channel presents or Andrea's Pop Culture Guide. Today is the latest Andrea's Pop Culture and Retrospective slash review, and this is on Ghostbusters, the 1984 film, starring Bill Murray and Aykroyd and the late great Howard Ramis, and directed by the late great Ivan Reitman. And this is the honor of the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters this year, when it was released in June 8th, 1984. Now, if anyone doesn't know what Ghostbusters is, let me do a little summary. Ghostbusters is about three professors: Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray; Ray Stantz, played by Dan Aykroyd; and Egon Spengler, played by the late great Howard Ramis, have been fired from the universe. They decided to take a job in investigating the supernatural and capturing ghosts in business. They decided to call themselves the Ghostbusters to capture ghosts who plague and terrorize New York. Joining them later in the film was the Senator, played by the great Ernie Hudson. Then trouble emerges when they build the apartment that Diane Barrett, played by Aliens fame Sigourney Weaver, and Louis Tilly, played by the great Moranis. Diane's neighbor lived in is the gateway to another world that brings upon the end of the world, aka ghosts. When ghosts are sent, the gatekeeper and the key master to possess those two, it's up to the Ghostbusters to save day and stop ghosts. Now, Ghostbusters is one of those rare movies where the original and, how you say, fragile comedic vision has survived a multi-billion-dollar production. It is not a complete vindication for big budget comics, since it's still true as a general rule that the more you spend, the fewer laughs you get. It's mildly, well, I'd say, but it uses its money wisely, and then that. And I say, monster emerges down Manhattan Avenue and climbs the skyscraper. You're glad they spent the money for the special effects because it gets one of the biggest laughs in a long time. Ghostbusters was ahead of its time in the mid-80s, while relying on more physical effects and stop motion animation and puppets rather than today's less imaginative CGI. The film succeeds at creating more technical moments than it fails to. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the content of Ghostbusters. I'll give a few mentions what kind of film Ghostbusters is, and does they have mentions to tell in this film. Given that I saw the film a long time and recently to review in my last review, I realized before I was had to go tuned with these themes. There's a lot of spiritual content of this film that I never realized. Of course, Ghostbusters is a comedy about three guys who studied the paranormal and saved New York City from an evil spirit intended to bring about the end of the world. There's very little to take serious about the film, especially when it makes it clear that comedy is the main intent from the beginning to end. In the story, the culted references arise, but even constantly characters refer to Christianity as a merely ancient myth. In that particular scene, however, another lead defends the fate and gives the other characters safe food for thought about the Book of Revelation. Now, the references of these Christian scriptures stop there, but the central theme of good overcoming evil remaining. And of course, the sign women of end times enthusiasts, a permanent background and a trial scene later in the film. Especially of the ghosts, goblins, ancient myths, and gods presented in the film are done in a preachy or effective way, but mainly are approached more as such as fantasy. Heck, even Aykroyd's character cites the revelation during the third act. And with the comedy being what weaves the story together, it's easy not to take the two too seriously. If the film didn't sort of wink at the audience throughout this narration, then one might need to pass this one by altogether. Like the lighthearted comedic nature of the film, its PG rating is not something you should laugh at. Ghostbusters isn't a family film. It isn't quite a family when it was released in the film. The movie's rating system only offered G, PG, and R. The mid-range PT rating was not yet exist. The first one that came out was actually in the same year, 1904, and that was Red Dawn, starring Patrick Swayze. With that said, I believe the film was released Now, under today's infamy standards, it could be scored or PG-13. Again, some of the films felt like, wow, it soared over my head when I was a kid. It was it's a little too dull for children, but same time, it contains a handful of S words, but I don't think it's a big deal. But just, you know, educate your children and kids about these kinds of colorful phrases. Also, the horror aspect of the story is a bit tense in some scenes for some kids to handle, but that's a good thing. I think kids like to be scared. Now, from the opening scenes with the ghosts in the library to terror dogs and frightening sequence where Diana is seized by the dogs at her apartment, the film has fair share of creepy moments and their effect. In general, Ghostbusters is a blast, thanks to the writers, Aykroyd and Ramis themselves, and director Ivan Reitman. They deserve a try to triumph since this motion picture is possibly the best blend of multiple genres of its kind. Everyone has strong performance. Bill May has a delightful performance as Peter Venkman. Is a genuine scene stealer with his thin pendulums and his limits of citizens of, of the world. He is also somewhat of an arc in the film. In the beginning of the film, he's portrayed as a womanizer and selfless wise, but in the finale took place, he felt like a lesser version of himself from the rest of the film. He ended up a different person out of the film's events, and that is something true. This is a well-timed, paced film. It's one of those few movies that have few flaws. Ray, uh, Ray Spengler and Weston, the fourth Ghostbuster I mentioned, played by Ernie Hudson, feel like the same people they were from the introduction. But however, this isn't a critical issue. That's the point. They don't have arcs. The only person who has that is Peter Venkman, played by Bill Murray. All have terrific chemistry between each other, and a retro role in the storyline with a sprinkle of existential jokes tossed in for good measure. Even the characters lacking in the character development or limelight like the main characters, well, Venkman's love interest, Diane Barrett, and of course, her married neighbor, Louise Tully, and the Ghostbusters secretary, Janine Melendez, played by Eddie Potts, are all engaging in different ways, in a good way. And they're pretty much memorable throughout the Ghostbusters franchise. Now, just wrapping up, after 4 years, Ghostbusters is still one of the best comedy films of all time. It still holds up almost 40 years later. The special effects look great. Yes, the effects used to make the actual ghosts look much more scary in my mind than the recent ones have. The on-screen chemistry between all characters are great, clear, and from the get-go. They seem all natural together because they work from each other from previous movies and Saturday Night Live. The gags, the puns are still funny. They don't feel dated at all. Even the 80s music fits well with the whole film. Now, there could be some nitpicks, like Sigourney Weaver is a bit under the side in the film, but she looks externally attractive in this film, and she doesn't have much to work with, but still, she has good chemistry with Bill Murray. And of course, uh, I say it, the film perfectly has the right balance between scares and humor throughout the film. Ghostbusters is essentially a comedy first, foremost, and horror second, but I can think of any other film that combines both elements so well. It has great cast, great acting. Also, that has that annoying Walter Pack that was a huge jerk to the Ghostbusters, but he's also memorable. Also has one of the most hilarious moments as the State Buff Marshall Man and the Gadgets vehicles were all the best. Ghostbusters in the last 40 years is a huge icon. It has launched a franchise that includes multiple sequels, reboots, and an upcoming new sequel that happened last week in March of, yes, 22 of 2024 called Ghostbusters The Frozen Empire, and two animated series, great video games, and comic books. So, no further ado, get into Ghostbusters. And I highly recommend the first film that started all, Ghostbusters, the 1984 film directed by Ivan Reitman, starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Howard Ramis, Annie Potts, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, and Ernie Hudson. Everyone, thank you for joining my 40th anniversary review of Ghostbusters. I'll come back later for another latest Andreas pop culture retrospective / review. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend and ciao.